I'll just ask our audience a question first of all, if you'd raise your hands. How many of you believe in God? Okay, a forest of hands. So Richard Dawkins, these people are deluded. Every single one of them.
Well, I fear that's right, yes. I would say it's rather like the phenomenon of the imaginary friend that children have and that comfort them and console them. But there's actually not the slightest shred of evidence that any kind of supernatural being exists. So I'm sorry to say, deluded, yes.
Deluded. How can so many people be wrong?
Well, there was a time when everybody believed that the world was flat. There was a time when everybody believed that the sun whizzed round the earth. People are very, very frequently deluded. And by the way, of course, there was a time when people believed in Zeus and Apollo, and in other parts of the world they believed in Thor and Wotan. People have believed in fairies and leprechauns. Everybody in this room, I would guess, knows what it's like not to believe in the god of some other religion. You know that if you happen to be born in the Middle East, you'll probably be Muslim, and people who are born in the Middle East believe equally fervently in their god. They can't both be right. There are so many different gods that people have believed in throughout history.
So what people believe is really an accident of geography?
Exactly right, yes.
Friedrich Nietzsche famously said that God was dead, and Sigmund Freud can be rendered as having said that God was dad. And I think both of them are probably right. The concept of God is like everything else in our vocabulary, man-made. It's an invention of human beings. Unless you take the view that God made us, in which case it'd be a lot to explain. Why did we in that case make so many gods? It does seem to be very much more probable that men and women made many gods than that any one God made all men and women and the rest of creation. And as well as being man-made, it's fear-made. It is the unexpressed or partially expressed wish for a protector, a parent, someone who will never desert you, someone who will do in a way you're thinking for you, especially on questions of moral philosophy. At its best, it's that. It's a wish to be loved more than you probably deserve. And at its worst, it's the underdeveloped part of the human psyche that leads to totalitarianism, that wants to worship and that wants a boss, that wants a celestial dictatorship. And that's the bit that's now threatening to destroy our secular civilization. And so you're quite right to start where you do. It used to be believed, the number of gods now is infinite, and a new god is created almost every day by some cult or other, but it used to be that. There was a belief that gods were in the trees, in the woods, in the springs, in the sea, in the clouds, and so forth. Polytheism of a kind. Then something a bit more polytheistic like Olympus, where there was at least a location for the divine, but it was multifaceted. And then monotheism, getting it down to one. So I regard this as progress of a sort, because they're getting nearer the true figure all the time.
I actually, Rabbi, yes.
Do you think there could be one sentence that could convince, let's say, a creationist to seriously doubt their theory? Ideally, if you could convince a believer in God to really doubt their belief, but that's too hard.
Not sure about a sentence. I think perhaps the single most convincing fact, the observation that you could point to would be the pattern of resemblances that you see when you compare the genes using modern DNA techniques, actually looking at the letter-to-letter correspondences between genes. Compare the genes of any pair of animals you like, pair of animals, pair of plants, and then plot out the resemblances, and they fall in a perfect hierarchy, a perfect family tree. And the only alternative to it being a family tree is that the intelligent designer deliberately set out to deceive us in the most underhand and devious manner. Moreover, the same thing works with every gene you do separately, and even pseudogenes that don't do anything but are vestigial relics of genes that once did something. I find it extremely hard to imagine how any creationist who actually bothered to listen to that could possibly doubt the fact of evolution, but they don't listen. I mean, your question is a perfectly good question, but it's not really relevant, because what they do is simply stick their fingers in their ear and say la la la. They know what's true because it's in the holy book. And that even, I mean, the most extreme case is the geologist Kurt Wise, who has a PhD in geology from Harvard, and said, if all the evidence in the universe pointed towards an old Earth, I would be the first to admit it, but I would still be a young Earth creationist, because that is what Holy Scripture teaches me. You cannot argue with a mind like that. A mind like that, it seems to me, is, well, a disgrace to the human species.
Well, first,
one day,
you're right that science has made many things more comprehensible to us, and it's explained things that religion used to take credit for. In other words, now we know there's a germ theory of disease. Diseases are not curses or revenges from heaven. Same with earthquakes and so on. The stuff they used to teach us, and many of them still do, is nonsense. Evil nonsense as well as ignorant nonsense. But it's also taught us, just in my lifetime, an enormous amount more about how little we know. We're much, much more ignorant than people who lived before Galileo. Because we have now an increasingly large idea of the fantastic expanse of the unknown. That's precisely the moment at which to say that skepticism is what's necessary, inquiry, debate, doubt. Where's faith in this? Where's the usefulness of faith there? There's no use to it at all. Socrates, who, as far as I know, existed but may well not have done, it doesn't matter to me. No one will insult me if they say, Socrates, your great hero, didn't exist. Try it on a Muslim, try it on a Christian, their prophets didn't exist. Or tell people that Moses is a myth. They start hurling themselves about, making menacing noises very often. Socrates said, you're only educated when you've understood how ignorant you are. And you're only going to even find that out by doubting everything all the time. There's all the difference in the world between that outlook and that mentality, and the mentality of faith. And second, on metaphysics, which you, I noticed, take refuge in several times already this evening, like what is love? Is something poetic or is it prosaic? Very good questions, but metaphysical ones. Those who say God exists and intervenes in the world, in other words, those who say there is a religious God, the God of religion, are saying that redemption is on offer to human beings, that salvation is on offer to them, and that if they reject the offer, they can be in really big trouble. Now, don't start talking to an audience like this, or, if you don't mind, to a debate partner like me, as if religion was a private matter, because everybody knows that if it was, there wouldn't be anything to argue about. It's precisely because it claims to be a total solution, a complete solution to all problems, available on pain of death, sometimes, in some forms, but available to you if you only have enough faith. Well, we just found out that faith is probably the most overrated of the virtues and the one least useful to us in the real dilemmas that we actually have to face.